Hey, Bookworms of Concord. So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about books that I wish I could read for the first time. These are books that were just so amazing or so impactful that I just wish I could kind of go back in time and read them for the first time, or read them today for the first time with no previous knowledge of what they're about. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about what each of them are about as we go forward. The first one on my list, which might not surprise you if you've seen my previous video, is the Neverending Story by Michael Ende. I read this way back in elementary school, and I reread it last year. It still holds up. This was my very first fantasy book I ever read. So it was my introduction, not just into fantasy in general, but also the dark fantasy subgenre. And yeah, it's just a beautiful story. It's incredibly well written, and the book is much better than the movie, by the way. Like I said in a previous video, if you read this book and then watch the movie, you'll be extremely disappointed with just how bad the movie is. But yeah, I just wish I could experience this for the first time. I think I technically did, because when I reread it last year, it was, man, I don't know how many years. Like I said, I was in elementary school. It might have been almost 30 years, not quite, probably around 27 or 28 years since I had read it. So it felt like I was reading it for the first time. So maybe that it shouldn't be on the list because of that, but but it was my second time reading it. Anyway, this was just so good. Next is Halo: The Fall of Reach. I read this back in middle school when the first Halo game was still fresh in 2001. It was, this was our very first dive into the Master Chief's past. So we were all super excited about this book, and I wore this book out so much that it literally began falling apart. This isn't the same copy that I had back then, because as you can see, it's not falling apart. Just after several moves, there are quite a few books I've lost, and this was one of them, so I had to repurchase it. And I purposefully purchased this first edition of it. There is a later edition with a more artful cover, and it's a little bit larger too, and it has gotten rid of a lot of the spelling errors, but I had to get the original first edition because it's what I read back then. Next is The Green Mile by Stephen King. Not only do I wish I could experience this reading this for the first time, but I wish I could read this without having seen the movie first, because I saw the movie first and the movie blew my mind. It was really good, in my opinion, probably the closest movie to its book source than any other Stephen King movie. But yeah, I went to the movie not knowing anything about it, I didn't see a certain key element of the story coming, and so I wish I could read this for the first time without having seen the movie first. Next is Strangers by Dean Koontz. This was, at the time, my second Dean Koontz novel I read, and although I predicted a key plot element, I still thoroughly enjoyed the depth of Koontz's masterful plot development. It was just that good. Next is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This was my first dark academia, and only so far, by R.F. Kuang. And this just absolutely broke my rating scale, and it changed how I view colonialism. This is definitely one of my favorite books of all time that I've ever read. Next is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I'm still reading Rhythm of War right now, And I put this on the list because I wish I could read this again for the first time, because I was a bit overwhelmed with the world building at first. So I wish I could read this again for the first time while retaining the endurance I've gained after reading its sequels. Next is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Again, one of my favorite books of all time. This also broke my rating scale, which was very surprising. I did not expect it to be so good as it was. I didn't expect to really enjoy it. It's always a hit and a miss with me with classics. Either I really don't like it very much, or it's amazing, and this was definitely amazing. I also realized when I read this that it's not a horror novel but sci-fi. So that was just a great experience. And the book was so impactful that as a pastor, it changed how I preached. I've talked about that before. So yeah, if you haven't read Frankenstein, you've got to read it. Next is Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Actually, the entire series, all 4 books. Also, one of my favorite books or book series of all time. But it's just perfect. Of every book series I've read, this is the perfect introduction to a series ever. Like, this should be studied on how to write good literature. And this series was just so mind-blowing that after reading it, I kind of suffered an existential crisis in a good way. One of those moments where you read something either throughout the book or at the end, you just kind of lean back and stare at the ceiling, contemplating your existence. The whole series is just that good. Next is actually a duology, also by Dan Simmons. The first book is Ilium, and Olympos is the second book. Again, one of my favorite books of all time I've ever read. Basically, I mean, it's Homer's The Iliad in space. Need I say more? The next book I wish I could read for the first time is a little novella of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. It's a very tragic story that made me depressed, not in a really bad way, just in a good, enjoyable way. But why would I want to experience that feeling again? Well, because the story teaches you empathy. You really feel for one of these specific characters, Lenny, in the book. If you know, you know. All right, we're almost done. This is my penultimate book I wish I could read again for the first time, and that is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I was pretty young when I read this. I was, maybe 24. I'm 35 now. But I guess I should say pretty young, a young reader's mind, I should say. I wasn't fully into reading as a hobby then. But so I just wish I could re-experience this with a more mature mind of a reader. I do plan on reading it, though, soonish. And lastly, The Return of the King, the last book of the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. This was my favorite of the entire trilogy. It's just a perfect conclusion to Tolkien's epic. I also plan on rereading this soonish, the whole trilogy at least. Especially because when I first started reading it, I had like a really large book. I had all 3 in one book, and I didn't like that, especially because on Goodreads it counts as one book and not 3. So I ended up borrowing the trilogy from my church's library that I was serving at previously, and I just not too long ago finally got my own copy of the entire trilogy as separate books. So I definitely plan on rereading the trilogy soonish. There are other books I want to read. So those are the books I wish I could read for the first time. So what are some books you wish you could read for the first time? Let me know in the comments. Okay, bye.